Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Revenge of the Shinobi. In the last parts, we start off the game and now we're gonna go finish it off. I mean, it says finale for a reason. And now we're in stage 5, which is by and large probably my least favorite stage of the game. Less so for the first half, more so for the second half. More on that in a few minutes. The first half, though, so to speak, is a pretty simple climb up a vertical tower. There are laser cannons, though, that are both above you and to either side, and you need to use them as platforms to reach the top. And the platforming here isn't simple by any means, but it's relatively safe. The jump I just did is probably the tightest jump in this portion because you need to make a jump with the double jump. That's almost too tight for comfort, but you'll always make it as long as you double jump at the right points. I mean, it helps that there's no instant death hazards in this stage, but still, it could have been more comfortable, but it also could have been somehow probably less comfortable. Now, this game did get a couple of different revision changes over the years, due to certain rights things running out and things like that. For instance, the boss of Stage 6 in particular got like 3 different versions of its first phase, 2 of its second phase, because let's just say they were a bit too close to certain other characters, so they decided to change things a little bit. I also know for a fact on the Virtual Console release, the face of Joe Musashi on the title screen is completely different. He's based off of one of the programmers for the Virtual Console rather than some actor at the time. The latter half of Stage 5 is a highway. There are 2 layers to this place. The front layer where there's some platforms with items on it, but you can't progress there because there's walls, and the highway itself. On the highway, you have ninjas that jump out at you once you walk past them, and red cars that come by periodically to swipe into you and do about 4 damage. The red cars in particular are why I hate this section, because I'm always inconsistent about predicting when they're going to show up, and when you combine them with the red kunoichi, there's a lot of damage going around, let alone the fact there's very few ways to easily escape it, because, and this is mostly a me thing admittedly, more than likely, I'm someone that often double jumps if I have a double jump in the game at any point just as an extra maneuverability option, or if I'm, say, bored and just want something for my hands to do while I'm waiting, or while I'm moving from point A to point B. Doing that here more often than not will get me killed, and that's no good. Thankfully, though, it's done, and we're on to one of the more disappointing boss fights in the game. According to the manual, this is called the high-speed chase. We're on a giant armored vehicle. There are 3 red weak points located throughout the top of it that we need to destroy. The first one you can just kick into while jumping over the sparks. The gun that it fires has no real points to be there, honestly. And I recommend, honestly, avoiding the second weak point and going for the third one first, because I think the more weak points you kill, the faster the sparks get. And as you can see, this is right next to where the sparks generate, so you want to be a little bit careful here. And the main reason I want you to go, or you should go after the second one last no matter what, is it's on a platform the sparks don't climb, so you're completely safe when you go for that one. It's probably the easiest boss in the game by and large, but you can still take a cheap hit every now and then due to how precise some of the jumps have to be for you to not only jump over the sparks, but still hit this particular weak point that I'm attacking right now. I believe falling off the car is instant kill. I've never done it, so I'm not sure. I would assume it to be so, though. Because, I mean, you're going at least 70 miles an hour, maybe by my estimate, so yeah, that would hurt a lot. And we're good. Thankfully, now I can jump onto the road, no problem. With that, though, we are now moving on to Stage 6, or as the manual calls it, Chinatown. This is an odd stage in that you want to be super conservative through it, more so than usual. As this is the first point in the game you're required, more or less, to use a ninjutsu skill. You need to use the ninjutsu of Fushin here to increase your jumping heights. because there is a particular jump we'll be getting to in a moment that you can only reach with that unless there's like a pixel perfect jump to do, or rather, unless there's like a very pixel perfect way to do a standard double jump to get up to the point in question. There are two particularly annoying enemies in this stage. These Master Asia from G Gundam looking guys with the stabs that they're constantly spinning because they're just not always vulnerable. And this Cheongsam layering lady, because she is super kicky flippy, and because of that, hitting her isn't always the easiest thing. But right here, first off, there's I think some hidden shurikens right here, hell yeah, is where the required jump is. We need to reach that girder on the top right, but unless you do like a very particular pixel perfect jump, I think it's impossible to make without using Fushin and then doing a double jump from there. I believe there's a task way to do that, but again, you practically need to be a computer to do it. More often than not, you're just gonna need this spell. The annoying thing is, I know for a fact you can get super close consistently just by doing a normal double jump, but you'll never quite make it. It's annoying. Don't stop Neo Z, but I want to. They got my girlfriend, and they killed my people. Actually, I forget. Have I checked the manual to see if the story's any different? Let's see here. The Revenge of Shinobi. In the impenetrable mountain hideaways of Japan exist mystic warriors, the ninja. These masters of battle possess seemingly impossible powers. In combat, they leap to dazzling heights. When hit, they remain unhurt. Well, that's just a straight-up lie. They can summon fire from the sky to torch the enemy. That is true. Before I continue on, this part of the stage is pretty simple. It's a very straightforward path with some bombs and enemies along the way. The thing you need to watch out for is, well, you ever seen the movie Speed? There are girders on the top of the side of the subway that will just try to face plant into you and do some damage, and I think it does at least 2 units, so be careful. Again, though, as long as you're crouching, you're not invulnerable to damage. There are some like that one that are low enough to still hit you, but you'll at least be able to avoid most damage, and if you stick to the left of the screen anyway and aren't rushing ahead willy-nilly, you probably won't get hit anyway. You studied ninja ways since you were small. In the dojo, you began as the weakest one, and anyone could overcome you. But every day, you practiced and meditated. At last, you mastered the skills of leaping, somersaulting, and throwing the deadly shuriken. Finally, a day came when the sensei, your teacher, revealed to you the secrets of Shinobi, the art of stealth. At last, he taught you ninjutsu, the ninja master. Magic. You are Musashi, the master ninja. Your hands and feet are lethal. In your grasp, every ninja weapon is an instrument of death. Now an evil and powerful enemy, the Neo Z, has sent out its own ninjas, soldiers, spies, and villains to take over the world. As a warning to you, they assassinated your sensei, kidnapped the beautiful Naoko. You swear to annihilate Neo Z, you stalk them around the world, destroying them wherever they exist. You never sleep, you never stop, and you don't give up until this vicious enemy is destroyed. Your world won't be safe. Yeah, that's just a less personal way of telling Musashi's story, I guess. They did kind of hit a very consistent tone moving forward in the Shinobi games, at least in terms of the console releases. The 2 Game Gear games we'll be getting into later on are a little bit different in that regard, so we'll talk more about that when we cross that path. Either way, I believe we're coming up on the boss fight. I actually forget. The reason I say I forget is this stage kind of scrolls automatically into this new background once you get here, and I forget when that happens time-wise. This is the boss that got a lot of changes depending on the version because that's just straight up Spider-Man, and he's even labeled as such in the manual with copyright information. He sticks to the top of the screen, occasionally doing an invisible little dash down to try and touch you. His big attack, though, is using webs to stun you for a little bit. That's it. Eventually, you'll do enough damage that he just straight up nopes out of the ceiling, though, depending on the version you're playing, or he'll just straight up transform into either Batman, and I'm not joking, it is just straight up Batman with Man-Bat's wings practically in some versions, but in this version we get quite a different looking character. You ever hear of Devilman? This phase, he has little bat familiars that are constantly flying around trying to damage you. He'll try to sweep into you like that, and occasionally he'll charge up and do a charge across the entire bottom of the screen where he tries to home into you. It's not a hard boss, honestly, as long as you are good at double jumping and throwing shurikens while jumping, and you have enough health, he'll go down pretty quickly. It's more so just the random factor of the Spider-Man license, which I believe was because Sega themselves licensed Spider-Man the game at the time or something. With that, though, we're on to stage 7. The second to last stage in the game. Shinobi games are generally pretty short. Only one game has more than, I think, 8 stages. And that's the final one we'll be doing for this marathon. But this is arguably the most dangerous stage in the game. Not the deadliest or hardest, but definitely the most dangerous in terms of hazards. Because the water here, unlike in Shinobi 1, is instant kill if you fall into it. So, time your double jumps carefully, wait for enemies to jump and attack you so you can get the jump on them instead. And yeah, be super careful. This stage is rough. I would hesitate to say any of the Shinobi games are easy, like I said last part. So if you die a lot, don't be too surprised. Thankfully, at least compared to the first 2 games, this game is relatively kind in that a game over doesn't send you back to the title screen at first. You have 3 continues, and with the amount of lives you can get just by killing enemies or looking around hard enough, I'd say those 3 continues, even on a fresh playthrough, could get you over halfway through the game with enough war of attrition. Getting past stage 6, though, no, stage 7, though, that's where things get rough. Not only for this platforming sequence, but I honestly think this stage also has the hardest boss in the game. More on that in a few minutes. Now, something I find very interesting about this game is its release date. Most people tend to associate the Genesis as a 90s console because that's when Sonic came around and where it really exploded. But the Genesis is an 80s console. Genesis is what Nintendo was the Genesis compared to the NES, not the Super Nintendo. And you can tell as much just from the fact that this game got released in '89. And it's interesting to me in a way because I feel... I don't think we have a direct confirmation of whether or not it was in terms of the musical composition and inspiration, but I feel this game was one of the bigger inspirations musically for The Messenger, if not this entire series in general, really, given its Genesis-y tone and, ninjas. Also, something I just realized I haven't gone over yet is speedrun stuff in terms of what the times look like for the game so far. I'll go over that in a minute, because I want to mention a very odd thing about this song that reminds me of something. The main little riff, the bam, reminds me a lot of Lego Rock Raiders, was it called, I think, on PlayStation 1, and the version I played as a kid was on PC. I don't know why, it just does. Alright, so let's see here. Shinobi 1 on Master System, world record 12 minutes. That feels about right. There's only an 80% category because that's all you can really do. Shadow Dancer, Master System, 6 minutes, 59 seconds, 200 milliseconds because it's that short of a game. That's about all there is. There's only one run. Whereas this game so far probably has the most diverse speedrun stuff. Now there's more than 3 runs. 12 minutes, 40 seconds on console, on Virtual Console Emulator, about 14 minutes. Interesting. It's shorter on actual Genesis so far. Interesting. Usually it's the opposite. Wait, why are almost all of them a hardest difficulty? The rules say you can use any difficulty. Is it just a preference thing? Also, I think I'm missing a power-up somewhere in this stage, but oh well. So we had Spider-Man, Batman, and Devilman last stage. How do you guys feel about Godzilla? I should note, this character also got a different sprite later on in a different revision where he doesn't have skin, because I guess the Godzilla reference was a bit too on the nose. This boss only has 2 attacks, a fire breath that tracks onto you somewhat, and if you're too close to it, a tail whip that does a lot of damage. This is arguably the hardest boss in the game just from a damage perspective, because it hurts. It's also huge, and you can also only easily jump over it, rather, if you use a Fushin technique. So I recommend having at least 1 ninjutsu ready for this boss fight. Whenever it gets too close to you when you're on top of one of the platforms, jump over it and then repeat the pattern. Stick to the far left and right side so you are immune to its fire breath for as long as you can. And if it does 2 fire breaths in a row, hope it does them at such a timing relative to your jump that you'll avoid both, because otherwise you're probably going to die, I'll be real. That boss isn't easy. I may have made it look a little easy there despite the damage I still took in it, but it knew. Also, I should probably mention the only actual difference between the difficulties, I believe, is how much damage you take. Thankfully, no Shinobi game compared to other games of this generation lock the best ending, should they have alternate endings at least, behind a difficulty. It's usually you have to do thing A or thing B. And by that I mean just thing A or thing B in, I think, this game alone? Because I don't think any of the other games I'm covering for this little mini marathon have different endings. Wait. No. No. Yeah, no, I think that's all the same ending moving forward. Technically. More on why I say technically, I think next game, if I'm recalling the release order. Alright, so Stage 8 is the hardest stage in the game. I still think Stage 7 is more dangerous in its first half, due to the potential for knockback into bottomless pits. But this stage, the final stage, just throws absolutely everything at you. It will not let up. And you need to be very careful in this stage, because as I just mentioned, this game has two endings, good and bad. And you can technically get the good ending without a power-up, but you're gonna want a damage power-up for the final boss to make getting the good ending comfortable, is the best way to put it. Because otherwise, you're in danger. If you take your time, though, by this point you should have a shitload of shurikens. And outside of maybe the grenade-throwing enemies, not many enemies in this stage have long-range attacks, so you should be fine as long as you have patience. Which I guess is kind of the name of the game, because you're Shinobi, you're supposed to be stealthy anyway, although none of the games you're actively stealthing. Thank God. An 8-bit or 16-bit stealth section sounds like absolute hell in a platformer, honestly. So I'm grateful, honestly. Actually, I'm trying to think, have I ever played a good 2D stealth section in like a side-scroller? The closest I can think of is that one part of Metroid Zero Mission, and anytime the SAX is on screen in Metroid Fusion. I can't think of many others besides those. Maybe there's a reason it's not a very common thing. Alright, the latter half of the stage is a bit different in that it's a maze. There are doors numbered in, I think it's technically Chinese characters. Ones that have circles are the entrances, the ones that don't are the exits. The moment you get in front of a door, you enter it. There's no button pressing, so you need to make sure you don't accidentally enter a door you don't want to. There is one pathway that leads very quickly to the exit, and it's what I'm taking. Otherwise, you'll be in here wandering for a while. Just follow where I'm going. You'll reach the end, no problem. That there's probably the most dangerous part there if you don't take out that enemy beforehand, as if you try to invincibility frame your way through it, the likelihood is you won't be able to, and you'll get knocked back into that door, being sent elsewhere. There's also, I believe, a very handy map that guides you along the path to this maze on GameFAQs, if I'm recalling off the top of my head. The only other big part that's annoying that is very easy to mess up is that part where right after you go through a door, you need to hold right, otherwise you're just falling. Thankfully, no bottomless pits in this maze. I know some games would have done that very easily. But this game's kinder than that, so far. They do actively place power-ups in most of the blocks here along the way, though, because they know it's the easiest way to get the best ending. So they are at least kind in that regard. Honestly, even though I think sometimes the attacks of some of the boss fights are super annoying to dodge, I don't think there's a single Shinobi game that's out to actively cause pain. Usually the level design is competent enough to the point where if you mess up, either you feel like it's your fault, or you realize that you just weren't prepared enough, so to speak. Like you weren't anticipating this many enemies. At least on their normal difficulties. The higher difficulties is an entire thing, is an entire completely different subject in that regard, I suppose. They definitely still wanted to make sure you got those video rentals in, don't get me wrong. With that, though, we're on to the final boss. I think this thing's just called Neo Zed. So there in the background is our girlfriend, Naoko. As you fight the boss, which I'm gonna just cheese by using the 2 or 3 ninjutsus I've saved up throughout the stage, which is another recommendation I should make, to Ikazuchi through his hitbox and damage him. You might notice there's chains in the background actively moving down. You can shoot those with your shuriken to stop it, because what it stops is that rock wall in the background slowly moving down. This fight is timed. If you take too long to kill the boss, Naoko is crushed to death, and you get the bad ending, which I'll be showing off in a few moments. If you kill Zed before that thing crushes her, you get the good ending, plain and simple. And I should note, another weird change between this and the Japanese version. The Japanese version had credits that happened during the ending sequence that are timed to the music. that just aren't in the US version. We're going back to Shinobi 1 almost in terms of just the end. And that's the end. I'll go over my thoughts of the game while we watch the bad ending where you let Naoko die, though. I should note, I actually cut a bit further than I originally intended to because I started recording late on this part of the fight. She actually does, like, get more panicked the lower the thing gets. Revenge of the Shinobi is easily the best game we've done so far, but it's far from my favorite because I feel while Musashi gets a lot of new cool moves in this, he's still just limited enough to be annoying. And I feel the attacks of some boss fights, if they're not super annoying to dodge, just do way too much damage for their own good. It's one of the harder games in the series. It's more competent than the first two, but if you're looking for one of the good Shinobi games, I would start after this. This is still good, but everything after this is just by and large, barring one game, just genuinely superior in every way, accessibility-wise. And yeah, she's just dead. Oh god, the facial shading there don't look good. Ugh. Either way, with that nightmare-inducing face, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Shinobi game, whatever that may be. I think it's Shadow Dancer Genesis, if memory serves. See you guys then.